Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the terrifying Von Lodge. So today we're going to be talking about a horror novel from the 1980s, a very 1980s horror novel, this one. A tremendous example of 1980s excess, and that would be this, the dreaded Necroscope. Necroscope by Brian Lumley. This is the story of Harry Kogue, who is a necroscope. Now, what is a necroscope, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. A necroscope is somebody who can talk to the dead. You see, in this story, death is not the end. People continue to exist past their death as spirits or kind of nebulous consciousness which kind of floats around, usually right around where their remains are. So Harry can go and he can talk to the dead, and the dead love Harry because it's boring being dead apparently, and they really want someone to talk to. So here comes Harry, who they all love, the dead people, and he talks to them. And more than that, if he's talking to somebody who has a great skill set, like if he's talking to a martial artist, for example, the dead martial artist can impart his knowledge to Harry, so Harry could become himself a great martial artist. So Harry, through his talking with the dead, becomes quite a skillful individual. Eventually, Harry goes to work for a top secret agency in Britain, which specializes in the paranormal. And actually, in Russia, there's a similar top secret agency, but this Russian agency employs not a necroscope, but a necromancer. Now, a necromancer is even creepier than a necroscope. He can also get the secrets of the dead, but the way the necromancer does it is he'll take the corpse of a dead person, rip it all apart, wallow in its guts, and read the pieces of the dead guy, and he'll read the secrets of the dead person in that way. And it's really disgusting and gross. So the necromancer in this book, the necromancer is pretty much the main villain, really well-developed villain. This book actually has some well-developed characters in it. And so the thing that Necroscope is known for, the Necroscope series, is the vampires. There are vampires in this book. And the vampires are really, really creepy. They're not Twilight vampires, no. The vampires in this are terrifying and awful, ghastly monsters, which frankly is how we want our vampires to be. And they certainly are in this. So Necroscope is a whole series of books. I think there are about 15 of them. And so this is part of my Necroscope retrospective. I'm going to be reading all of the Necroscope books. Not just this one, which I had read, like I said, when I was 17. And I remember being kind of embarrassed by liking it just because it was so crazy. And it is crazy. This book is nuts, but in a good way. It was interesting to read this as an elderly person. It's interesting to read this at this point in my life. And so far past the 1980s that produced it. Because this is really, really nuts. I mean, it has vampires, it has the necroscope that can talk to the dead, you've got the necromancer, zombies show up at one point, teleportation plays a part in this story. I mean, it's just, you get the feeling when you're reading this that literally anything can happen, because it's just that over the top. So it'll be interesting to read the rest of the series because, like I said, anything can happen in this crazy book. It's nuts. Now, the writing in this book is actually really good. I was surprised how well it was written. Brian Lumley was influenced by great pulp writers like H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard. He read a lot of that stuff, you can tell. And so his prose is very pulpy. It's a very pulpy story. It's written in a very pulpy manner, which is good. That's the way you want it to be if you're telling a story like this. And this is a newer edition of Necroscope. And he's got a great foreword in this, Necroscope by way of a foreword. And he talks about the influences, the things that influenced him. He talked about finding old copies of Weird Tales. He talks about EC comics, the great horror comics from the 1950s. And you can tell that that influenced him because the monsters in here are just ghastly creatures. Like I said, the vampires, ugh, horrifying, just like you want them to be. And so he talks about that and how he created Necroscope. So that was interesting. And so Brian Lumley is probably a better writer than he gets credit for being. Necroscope is famous for being kind of a cheesy, schlocky horror series from the 80s and 90s. And I guess it is that. But it's also really good. And if you're a horror fan, but especially a horror fan who can appreciate horror from the 80s and from that time, you definitely want to check this out. It has this great Bob Eggleton cover here. These were iconic. We all remember these if we used to buy books in the 80s because every Necroscope book that came out for a while had covers by this guy. And they're all really wonderful, iconic covers. I mean, just look at that thing. Very of its time, that cover, and it's just a beautiful job. I'm glad they maintained it for this edition here. So yeah, Necroscope. If you're a horror fan, you're definitely going to want to check this out. It's a lot of fun, excellent, over-the-top horror. It's no masterpiece of great literature, that is true, but really, do you want it to be? Probably not if you're reading this. So that was Necroscope by Brian Lumley. I will be reading the next one in the series, probably not this month, but next month I should get to it, and I'll talk about that one as well. Goes some interesting places, the Necroscope series. So I'll be talking about the books as I read them. So the next time I see you will not be Sherlock Saturday, unfortunately, because I'm just not going to have time to do it. Sherlock Holmes will return the following Saturday, I'm hoping. So the next time I see you will probably be for the Sunday Penguin, when we talk about a book a lot different than this. Okay, guys. Thanks for joining me here at the rustic Vaughan Lodge. I will catch you next time at the stately Vaughan Manor. Take care. Have a great day.